This is NTV.
Welcome to this special conversation where we are delving deep into the matters of public transport in the Nairobi metropolitan area. Now, by official data, we have about 15,000 licenses of players within this particular space. And tonight we want to delve deep into issues affecting public transport in this metropolitan area. And we are delighted to have the Director General, Engineer Francis Gitau of the Nairobi Area Metropolitan Authority, that's NAMATA. Welcome on set, sir.
Thank you, Julians, and welcome to the State Department of Housing.
Engineer, sometimes I look at what we call public transport, and it looks to me like it's a misnomer because we have public transport dominated by private players. We don't have public transport where we actually see the government having a stake in it and therefore having the wiggle room to control a number of factors. What's your assessment of the state of public transport?
Julians, you cannot be more right than that in terms of the perception of the investment space. Yes, public transportation requires heavy investment, requires commitment. In the Kenyan space, it has become more of an industry that is expected to provide a return on investment. The willing investor in this space for the last 40 years has been the private sector. Why? Because they have created in their operational model an attraction that is related to door-to-door service, reliable services that actually are able to provide a commuter with a door-to-door service, whereby you can actually pick a matatu just outside your house. And unlike the other model, which was actually provided by the Kenya Bus Services, where it was more station based, and therefore there were lengthy last mile trips that were consumed, and it had a fare policy that was not flexible. Now, with matatus, if it is off-peak, they can change their fare from 100 to 20 shillings. So some of the attractiveness of this matatu brought a lot of private players, making organized transport unprofitable. And currently, public transport is a bottom line kind of industry. And it's where you're going to make a buck a day, and you're going to be assured of personal income every day. And therefore, government has not been able to before that, now compete with the private sector. However, on the consumption level of the trips that are generated from the various zones and the immediate regions like the metropolitan area, you find the public view transport as a service. So that's why we consider it as a public transportation service. However, as you say, in terms of investment, government has been absent. And this, we are talking about 4 decades. And it's a great pleasure now that the government has seen the opportunity that is embedded in the integrated national transport policy, that a public transportation authority that is able to become one part of the planning and public transportation conversation is created, and the Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority is basically just one of the transport authorities that could pioneer this transformation.
So given what we've just said around the present structure of public transport, as it were, then how do we ensure that we move from this very fragmented marketplace and we come to a more formalized structure where, for instance, we can have a guidance on a pricing policy, where we can have service delivery standards adhered to by the players in the public sector?
Julians, I think professionalizing the public transport sector is a must. And the delivery of a service must be predicated on a standard. It's like a diagnostic. It's like the way you would not treat the river if it's your heart that was paining. Now, when we come to public transportation, there are 8 criteria around which public transportation services are predicated, and they are measurable. When we talk about reliability, it means a scheduled service. How do you schedule your service? Only by having the right investment mix. Do you have enough buses? Where does your demand originate from? And what is the purpose of the trips that are consumed in the urban space? So this is the professionalization of it in terms of strategically planning for the transport. The instrument to do that is, first of all, based on an urban mobility plan, which is a map of trip consumptions generated from zones, distributed and allocated routes, looking at mode of choice. Could be railways, could be bus service, could be walking or cycling. And then you are able to design infrastructure elements in alignment to the demand streams from a mobility plan. And you see, when we have been designing infrastructure before, it has not been actually much informed by commuter demand, has been based on traffic studies for motorized vehicles. Now NAMATA is going to reconfigure the transport corridors to bring equity and equality in the consumption of this space and be able to develop public transport infrastructure that can actually accommodate the demand streams for generated traffic from different zones and distributed under the various modes to optimize on the public sector investment. For example, currently railways is only carrying about 16,000 vehicles. And the studies 2010 is saying the trips coming into the city in the morning are 3 million, 2010. They are telling us in 2030 we have trips into the city and out of the city in the evening getting to between 5.5 and 6 million. So 16,000. We need to optimize that service, do more investment with the rolling stock, improve the tracks, coordinate the infrastructure development in terms of transport facilities, create stations that can accommodate matatus, borders, can accommodate a BRT service, can accommodate commuter rail service, so that we have called what we call intermodal transport facilities. Efficiency must be built through a professional approach of planning.
I see. Let's talk a little bit about something you've touched on there, and that's the bus rapid transit system. One is that this plan has been in the pipeline for a while. We're seeing works ongoing. How far are we with it? And more importantly, to what extent do you intend to have that then decongest the individualized mobility coming into especially the central business district?
Our mass rapid transport study dates back to 2009. What we are implementing is a review of that study in 2014 that recommended 5 bus corridors. The bus rapid transit corridors. Why the bus? Is a quick win. Is a low-lying fruit. We would have talked light rail. We would have talked about underground. But the investment curve is steep for those alternatives. The culture in Kenya is more bus-related. People are used to bus services. It is a good transformation. Getting the social license to do that investment requires the winning of the hearts and minds of the key stakeholders. That process is not even based on how much money is pumped into this particular effort, but by having unity of purpose and unity of vision with the private sector. So, where is the time curve? We had predicted that line 2, which is the Thika road, in the first phase, from Kasarani to the Nairobi Central Railway Station, around 20 kilometers, will be completed by the end of August this year. And we would start a testing phase by the end of this year. We have already embarked on the importation of buses and an operational lease for the testing phase. It's an ongoing process. We have also rushed and kept pushing for the completion of the Kasarani substation, whereby we could originate some of these testing trips, and we are at speed trying to complete the station at the Nairobi commuter rail station. But between those stations, there are another 10 stations that will be built. So it's still a continuing phase, but we would be very happy to commence a testing phase, so that will take about 3 months, maybe up to December. And then we can move to the pilot phase, whereby we have all the stations operating to test the instruments of engagement. An industrial transition where providing a quality service requires it is under a contractual platform. And we are testing our draft transport service contract. We'll be testing that to see how it is working between us and the private sector. We'll also be testing some of the regulations that has actually been drafted to govern the consumption of the dedicated corridor. We'll also be testing our fare correction systems, because we are designing a closed system where we are safeguarding the fare box by having commuters pay before they consume the service. So we need to do the system tests. We are also going to test our first bus management system, which is, intelligent, where we have onboard hardware like CCTV and all monitored from a central bus management center that will be based in Kasarani. And then the tripartite of this contract in terms of the operator, the investors who are the current stakeholders, and the matter in terms of how we collaborate and work as partners, not necessarily as an employee and a service provider, but more of how do we monitor this service quality so that we exploit the investment in the short-term space. Okay. So that may look like it's still not a date, but it's work in progress.
Uh-oh, Donna. You've got places to be, and this chump has forgotten something. But he must trust you, leaving you with his basket. Time to take matters into your own hands. Grab that papaya. Now, make a mess of it.
Bing bang ding, ding ding bang, bum bum bang, ding bang ding, bum bum.
So guys, at Odibets we're all about winning, and this time we are doing it bigger, better, in a different way, with the one and only Diana B, aka Auntie Mado.
Yes, and guys, let me tell you where Auntie Mado is involved. It's about the big reveal, and this Wednesday, the 3rd of August, guys, it's going to be bigger, crazier. I have chills all over my body, because you know what? It's all about Diana and Odibets, because we are all about winning.
Could you give us a little some detail into, I'd imagine, the bus rapid transport system would necessitate that we have an operating company handling this. What is the design and form of this company in terms of shareholding and all the nitty-gritties which go into it?
Julians, I know we have shared some kind of a company structure that is in the public space, especially through what people now have come to realize is a very good partner to NAMATA, the Federation of Public Transportation Services. These are the aggregation of all the associations that existed when we started this industrial transition effort. And we have shared with them a company structure. And we are saying because every circle, most circles operate in multi-routes. And capitalizing a company is requires money. And we are saying there is power in numbers. So we say, why don't we include every operator within the metropolitan area, and they have agreed. And what is the shareholding structure? We have proposed, and there's a proposal on their table. We have proposed for the people who are directly affected on the corridor which we develop. Let's discuss 25%. Are you comfortable with that? They are discussing that even today. Okay, for everybody in the metropolitan area who is an investor in this space, let's give them 40%. Is that good? So they're discussing that percent because it's more about capitalizing the company, because without a consideration and without capital, then it would not be wise to envision that transition that basically relies on government investment. This operation must remain a private sector-led business. Government is coming in the mix to help transform this industry by bringing on board the professional approach to the delivery of public transport services. I want to tell you, Julians, that government in the first cycle of the pilot are taking the financial risk. But we are happy that our business plans, like in the Thika Road, are demonstrating that we have a good coverage with the fare box. The fare box is the total amount of money collected from the fares, going over 90%. So really then what will be the financial risk to the matter is not that high. And our expectations can be exceeded by an operation that is reliable. The demand, imagine, on Thika Road for a peak hour, like around Madare, is 36,000 passengers per hour, per direction. That means buses carrying 100 people, we are talking about 360 buses. That is a bus per second, We cannot even meet that demand in the peak hour. So we are saying, let's target 10, 20%, but the room for growth is enormous. And it's a business that can be profitable.
Clearly, I mean, based on what you're sharing, there is a compelling business case here. One of the issues which I'd like to understand is that how do you intend to go about the development of a pricing policy? Because one of the challenges we have with our public transport system is the way, the variability we find in the pricing. Peak hour, it's atrocious. Off-peak hour, it is way in the basement. So how are you going about this discussion of a pricing policy to ensure that on the one hand, you cater for investors' interests, on the other hand, the consumer interest is also catered for?
That will work once we develop the corridors, once we have a homogeneity of services along the corridors, because we don't want also to create an equal society. That is a very important point, Julians. And that is why we are saying the time is now to complete the development of the corridors and provide a homogeneous service to all the demand streams emanating from the west, east, south, and north of this city. Once that homogeneity of service is achieved, it will be easy to create a fair policy. However, currently, with just one corridor, and knowing this is a private sector-led business, if we had a policy that does not favor business, then government would have to bear the subsidy. And therefore, we believe as this service spreads to the 5 corridors and is integrated with the commuter rail services, then NAMATA and through the Ministry of Transport will be able to develop a fair policy that is predicated on household incomes and affordability, because that is a major attractor to the consumption of the services. And it will be a both win and win, because then the services will be able to take much of the demand within the city to even become a better business case, and it will be able to help households save their incomes and direct these incomes to other investment opportunities. Yes, the policy can be there. We are starting with the development of an urban transport policy. Actually, this is an ongoing process. I think we are quite advanced on that, and fair policy is part of that urban transport policy. Let's develop the corridors. Let's develop a service. with a quality index and then set a fair policy that both ensures the viability gap for these services is met while taking care of the citizens who consume this service.
Speak a little bit to the aspect of the quality index, and why I ask that question is because for the many people who drive their personal cars, the one issue they struggle with is the quality consistency in the industry. So what metrics are going into this quality index?
If you check the ISO, International Standards Organization, Public Transport Standard under 13186 that is developed, and it was in use from 2001, applied 2002 and 2003, we have 8 levels of service quality metrics, and not metrics but criterion. I may not even say criterion, I can say areas where public transportation standards are based.